Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the studio. My name is Jay Fullmer, and I've been an artist and illustrator for about 20 years. As a result, I have a real passion for the visual arts, especially how they can be used to celebrate the divine. So I'm creating this new series to take an opportunity to share not only my own work, but also the work of other artists, and talk about the process of creating art and skills and techniques, some advice, but also how it's changed how I study the scriptures. I'll also have some other resources to help you to use visuals in your own scripture study. So let's jump in with the very first project I ever published. It was called Book of Mormon Battles. It came out 20 years ago, 2004. And let me tell you the story about how that happened.
Well, okay, let's talk about Book of Mormon Battles. You know, the origin is, you might be a little surprised, it all happened because of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! The show had come out in the early 2000s, and they did a really smart thing. They released this TV show to teach kids how to play this complicated card game before they released any of the product. So my boys were so into it and wanted to play a battle card game, but the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards weren't yet available. And so I spent a Sunday afternoon and started putting together cards, coming up with point systems similar to what they were using in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, and took some art from the great Ronald Crosby, who, these are from illustrations from the 1976, the Book of Mormon story book. Did a lot of great portraits, but some were missing, and so I filled in some with my own drawings. Each card, and this was important to me, had the name up on top because the characters were what were most important. I really wanted this to be an opportunity for my kids to get to know who these people were. But the biographies for each of them with the scripture references, this was something that was really important. And even when we were publishing, when this game got published, there was discussion about whether we should include the scripture references, but it was non-negotiable for me. Scripture references needed to be there. The whole point of this was for kids at an age when they can read their own scriptures to say, what is happening in Alma chapter 1? And going to check it out for themselves. Using, again, Ronald Crosby's art, I created a card back, and that was it. That was the game. I laminated the cards, and the boys played them. But as they were playing, because some cards are higher value and some cards are lower value, the game plays like war. So if you lay down your card, whoever has the highest card wins. And so one of my boys laid down their card, and the other one flipped down the next card, and he said, I only have Laconius. And my heart broke. I thought, because Laconius is one of my heroes. And so for them to say, I only have Laconius, and to think of Laconius as somebody, more worthless, I was horrified. And I knew I needed to remedy that right away because, again, not everybody can have high points in this game. So I started creating power cards that would help to create more interest and would elevate the lower cards. For example, the Stripling Warrior card can be played so that the lowest gold card wins. So there's advantages to the lower cards as well as the upper cards. Anyways, it was beginning to turn into a game, and I had a friend that said, hey, you should really look into getting this published. So I looked around, and the only LDS company that was doing anything with games was Covenant Communications, which is now owned by Deseret Book. I contacted them, and they immediately contacted me back and said, we have been looking for a game like this. We would love to publish it. I said I would like to do the art. I didn't realize it at the time, but that I'm sure was a huge relief to them. So they said, yes, okay, but here's your timeline. December 2003 through April 2004. I had 5 months to do about 60 paintings, portraits of Book of Mormon people, something I'd never done before. And I was working a full-time job in an art studio for an interiors company. I thought that sounds impossible, but of course I said, oh yes, absolutely, I can do this. And so I jumped on the bed. This was early in the morning when I got the email, and so excited to tell my wife that this was going to be a thing I was going to do. With her support, it happened. So anytime I had free time, I was drawing sketches or writing down ideas about how I wanted to represent the various Book of Mormon characters. Again, never done this before. Don't know how to do the costumes or the look or the settings. This is all really new to me. But it was really exciting. So taking those drawings, I started to get models together. Often people at work, sometimes people at church. This guy worked in the fiberglass department of the interiors company I worked for. And he was totally cool to let me wrap some fabric around him for a skirt and then pose. So I picked the one that I wanted, and this was Giddy Ann High. And then I did the drawing and then did the painting. Each of the paintings, I only allowed myself 5 hours per painting because that was the only way I was going to get them all done. I was also painting in oils, something I'd never done before. I used a water-soluble oil, which I'd also never used before because it was going to be easier for cleanup, and I wouldn't have to use a lot of the solvents because I was painting in my basement. And so anyway, yeah, that's they started. I just grabbed pieces of canvas, about 16 by 20, and just started working on them. Now, interestingly enough, some characters, and I brought Giddy Ann High up here because he's the most, this is the most egregious error, I think. I knew that he was a Gadianton, but I really didn't understand who he was at the time. I painted him later, and this is much more who I think Giddy Ann High is. He's smarmy. He's a used car salesman. He's a politician. He's just somebody who is manipulative and not a warrior type in my mind at all. So I definitely got him wrong in the card game. But that's what happens. Some of the characters were so unlikable, and I didn't want to ask anybody to pose for them, so I posed for them myself. This is Siantum, and hiding the blood on his robe. So I think my 6-year-old son took the photograph for me in the living room. My wife was helping me. We were putting together costume pieces and just really, doing our best to put this together. I started, as the paintings were getting done, I started redesigning the cards, and they were a bit too busy. I was trying to make them really fancy, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not a great designer. I'm better now than I was then, but I have a tendency to make things overly busy and cluttery. Fortunately, as I was working with the graphic designer at Covenant, he ultimately came up with a really nice, clean, simple design that was not distracting and that worked really well for this. One of the things that was a change, you can see I put the names up on top because the names were most important. The publisher, and this was a good point, they said, look, this is a points game. The points need to go up at the top, but we'll make sure the names are nice and big and bold right under the picture. So that was acceptable. That made sense. Well, then I was working on the cover, and that was, again, cluttery. I did this painting of Captain Moroni and Sarah Hemna, put it on a map, and it just, again, not interesting. I tried painting some trim pieces, some border pieces that we might be able to use, and started introducing that. Again, not very interesting. We tried multiple incarnations of this, but both the designer and I were really struggling. with trying to have something dynamic that looked cool, that would be exciting. We were trying to use the card art at a certain point, and that just wasn't working. One of my favorite stories of the design of the cover was me working on it very early one morning. I was in Photoshop, I was moving things around, and my wife strolls by, and she just glances at it, and she says, well, why don't you just put that there and put this here, make these bigger, put them behind, and then you've got room for your name. And there it was. In like 2 seconds, she put together the composition that is the cover for Book of Mormon Battles, when I, an artist and a professional designer, were really struggling to get it right. So anyways, big kudos to my wife, who has been, throughout my art career, an invaluable critic, help. She's got a great sense of composition and gives me really good feedback. Well, I know this is about art, but here's the rules. I'll tell you an interesting thing about rules. When you write rules for a game, you have to recognize that you are coming into it with a whole bunch of assumptions. And so when you write the rules, you're assuming they're going to understand certain things. But people that are reading the rules for the first time do not have those assumptions. And so when I was having people play test this, and I'm in the other room listening to them, and they're trying to figure out the rules, and it was hard. It was heartbreaking, because they would read things that I meant in a particular way, and they'd read it in a completely other way. And so rewriting after rewriting after rewriting. But despite that agonizing process, we did eventually get the rules all figured out, and they did a great job laying them out. And then the game came up for sale, and to my delight, and I think everyone's surprised, they printed 10,000 units, which is a really high print number for an LDS product, and then they sold out within weeks. It was incredible, and the game's still on the shelves today. Shelf life for any product is usually very small. The thing that was interesting about this for me was that I had done all of these paintings with the anticipation they would only be seen pretty small. The card sizes are pretty small, and the images are about an inch and a half maybe. But I painted them about 16 by 20 because my thought was, if I painted them fast and loose, large, then when I shrunk them down, they would look more detailed than what they really were. And I was happy with that, except that these pieces became very popular as they got out online, and people began using them in classrooms and even in other book projects and so forth, because many of these characters had never been painted and never been, or had not been painted in a portrait format. The heartbreak for me was that many of these paintings I'm not really fond of. They worked for what they were supposed to work for, but I would like to repaint them. And they were only meant for this card game. I didn't have any aspirations that they would be seen in any other capacity. But what are you going to do? In many ways, once you put something out there, it really doesn't belong to you anymore. Well, let's take a little walk through memory lane here. This is the tin edition of Book of Mormon Battles. It was a special edition that came out. Let's take a look at these cards. It's been a while since I've looked through them. It's interesting to remember all of the ideas and the people involved. Oh, that was our stake patriarch who posed for Lehi. I really like how that painting turned out. That was one of the early ones. But yeah, friends and people from work. That was me. I posed for that one. And I also posed for the hand with the knife in front. So in essence, I was apparently going to stab myself. There's me as Siantum again, and other friends. Oh, this was good. This was our Elders Quorum president. He posed for this painting, and his son, years later, went to BYU, and the professor used this image to talk about Nehor when it came up on the slide. he stood up and said, "Hey, that's my dad," which, required some explanation. This is part of a painting, the very first Book of Mormon painting that I ever did. It wasn't a good painting, but it was my first one, and it was fun to be able to use a little piece of that for the game, which was good because, boy, was I running out of time. I like that Ishmael painting. It turned out pretty good. Again, trying to make each one distinct if I can, so they're memorable. Blues and yellows you'll see a lot in the good guys. Oh, that was a home teaching family. The father was not active, and I asked him to pose for Captain Moroni. And the kids were so excited that their dad was going to be a Book of Mormon hero. But yeah, you'll see red and black in the costumes and settings for the bad guys. I was doing a mural down in Texas, and I went to church that Sunday and asked this fellow if he would pose for me for one of the cards, and he was so kind and so accommodating. But I also really liked how the painting turned out. I think it turned out really well. So yeah, blues and gold for the good guys. You'll see those often in their costumes, and reds and blacks in the bad guys. Well, there you go. What a project that was. It was very, very special to me, and I'm gratified that people have enjoyed playing the game, and I really hope that it helped to, help them to imagine people in the Book of Mormon in this way or their own way or whatever it is, so that they feel more engaged in the scriptures. But I'm excited for the rising generation. Who of you out there has got ideas of creative ways to share the scriptures? Use your talents and gifts and share them. It will bless you and it will bless others. Well, thanks for listening through this and for sharing this with me. It's been a wonderful experience to go back through this project. And I'll look forward to talking to you about more projects coming up, and we'll see you then.